Well, good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. Again, good morning. I am Greg Sample. I am the facilitator of the group that has been working on Objective 3. Today is a listening session so that the campus community can receive an update on the work of the committee, and we can also solicit some feedback from you on what has happened and transpired to date. To give you a little bit more of a background, everyone should have received over the past month a couple of written communications via email framing a bridge strategic plan project that we have been working on behalf of the campus, which will guide much of our strategic interest 2023 through 2025. Essentially, there are 5 priority initiatives outlined in that plan. And the group that you're going to hear from today have been focused on objective number 3, which is essentially framed around forging strategic collaborative relationships. I will introduce the members of the committee and also the process that we've gone through, and then each of the committee members have broken themselves down into 3 subgroups. Those subgroups will present their initial findings to our audience today, and we would appreciate any feedback that you have on those. You can provide that today while we're meeting. You can also think through things and then provide us written feedback. And for those individuals who are not able to participate today, this session is being recorded, and anyone can go back in and view the discussion we're having today and then provide additional feedback. So with that, Nova, can we bring up our first slide? Again, give me a thumbs up if everyone can see the slides at this point. Great. So objective 3, again, is forging and sustaining strong collaborative relationships. To work on this objective, President Edwards established the following working group. Again, I'm serving as the facilitator. And then Bill Bigham, Lance Cawley, Dr. Weber, Ricky Peters from the board, Dr. Faber, Dr. Schmidt, Kurt Holden, Tracy Kramer, Daniel Palmer, and Dr. Raymer have been the primary liaisons to working on providing some structure to this objective. Next slide. Underneath the objective, some strategies and goals were identified, not by the group, but by the initial strategic planning process. And those are, and I apologize for reading, but I'm going to do it in case some are working and not looking at the screen. We will create strategic, innovative engagements and partnerships with business and organizations that are focused on serving the needs of our local community. And secondly, engaging with regional business partners to identify and respond to emerging skill needs and develop a curriculum in collaboration and consultation with the industry sector. We took that information and broke it down into creating a survey for our working group to identify what the group thought would be relationships for priority focus over the next 24 months. And again, let's frame this. You're going to note when we present the findings that we have to date, they are a little more focused than what you might otherwise see in a traditional strategic plan. And that is because this plan is focused on actionable steps that we're going to take over the next 24 months. So it's not a 5-year plan. It's not a 10-year plan. It is literally a 2-year plan. From the discussions within our committee, there were 3 broad categories identified to be strategic, of priority, and opportunities within those categories to actually effectuate something within a 24-month period. And those were defense, engineering, and technology as one category, healthcare, and then P12 education. Again, from these categories, the group broke themselves down into 3 subgroups, and we're going to now go through each of their findings to date. And again, this is in draft form. We're soliciting feedback, both written and verbal. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Raymer and his group.
Thank you very much, Greg. So as Mr. Sample said, our group was consisted of myself, Mr. Peters, Mr. Palmer, and Mr. Holden. And we were challenged to identify concrete actions that the university could take over the next 24 months to increase the strength of our relationships and to build new relationships, specifically in the domain of defense, engineering, and technology. So Nova, if you could give us the next slide. Thank you. And so after I think a very vibrant discussion, we identified two challenges to put before the university, two objectives to set. And those objectives were based on a couple of observations. The first observation was that frequently our potential partners in defense, engineering, and technology come to the university with a problem. As a chair and as a dean and as a faculty member, I've been approached by folks from industry, folks from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that have identified a problem, and they're saying, can you help us to model this process, to analyze this data, to solve this design problem? And frequently, you know, we in the university are in a position to say, yeah, that is a reasonable problem. It's interesting. There's some research aspect to it. I could identify a good student. I could work with them, and we might be able to solve that. But then we come to the position of saying, but you know, I have to be able to pay that student. I have to compensate them for their effort. How are we going to do that? And you know, especially with small businesses at times, it can be difficult to identify that initial source of funding until you've established a proof of concept. And so one way to build those relationships and not to have to immediately head towards the discussion of funding would be to establish a set of industry partnership seed grants. So we've had seed grant programs in the past. This one would be focused directly on building relationships with our industry partners, defense, engineering, technology related. It can go more broadly beyond that. To put a proposal towards this grant program, you would have to have an identified industry partner and a problem to work on. Typically, that partner will provide the problem and the data, and government partner as well. This would be a rolling application deadline, so that, you know, at any time that you're working together with someone from industry, you could propose to this. These would be small, short-term seed grants, and part of the application process would be to state, what does success look like? If you're successful, what's your plan for moving forward to establish a longer collaborative relationship and to fund that relationship through government contract vehicles, SBIR, STTR grants, federally funded grants? Where are you headed next? And we would be able to measure success of that program through the relationships that are established with our industry partners and our government partners, the number of follow-up grants that are submitted and the success of those grants, and students that are supported to have the opportunity to work on real-world industry problems while we continue to build up those relationships. So that is the first one. If anyone else in the working group would like to chime in with any comments on that, I'll pause for just a second to see if we have any. And certainly if there are any questions from our broader university community, now would be a great time to put them in chat or ask them. And if the pause starts to grow awkward, then I will move on to the second one.
Thanks, Mike. I think from a formatting standpoint for the meeting, for the group that's watching right now or listening, Daniel Palmer is actually scribing and watching the chat room. What I'd like to do is have us go through all of the core areas and the initiatives, and then we will save the Q&A for after the presentation is finished.
Very good. Thanks, Greg. Then can we go ahead and move to the next slide? So the group's second observation was that interfacing with the university can be particularly challenging for small businesses. I lost my slide. Does everyone else see it? There it is. Fantastic. Can be particularly challenging for our small business partners. Many of the colleges have corporate partnership programs, and those programs are often gradated according to the ability of the partner to contribute to the college mission financially through gifts and other collaborative methods. But for small businesses, this can be particularly challenging as they're more limited in people, they're more limited in funds and resources and so forth. Small businesses often, will come to the university with questions like, do you have anybody working in RFID? I spent a while searching the website. I didn't see anything. I'd really like to engage with them. Of course, their number one need is to connect with our workforce. They want our students, but they also have research problems. They also have problems that they want to just connect and discuss with experts in the field. They may be looking for the opportunity to share resources or facilities. They may be looking for other ways to connect with students. The Career Services Office does a fantastic job of interfacing with businesses of all sizes with those kinds of requests, but they are specifically focused on workforce development. So when there are other kinds of questions like, do you have any faculty doing RFID research? They're generally not in a position, although they often will step out and do that anyways, to answer those questions. And as a side note to this discussion, we also noted that the credentialing needs of our business partners are changing, and more of our partners are saying, hey, do you offer a certificate in data science? Do you offer a certificate or a micro-credential in this area because I need someone who I know is skilled in this particular technology? And so to explore that, we're suggesting that we have either a small business engagement office or a liaison that works very closely with career services, but also with the colleges, that has an understanding of the research capability, the facilities of the university, and that can connect small businesses with the right people to help with meeting their needs, both in workforce development, but also in connecting with students, in intern and co-op programs, in research connections, in identifying opportunities to engage with advisory boards, possibly even putting together an annual small business partner meeting to talk with our community about how we can better serve the small business needs of our area. We're uniquely situated in that we have a lot of small businesses in the defense, engineering, and technology areas in our vicinity. So to have a really tangible way to be seen as a partner for them in solving their problems would go a long ways in building relationships with those small businesses. And so those are the two for our group. And so I'll turn it back over to Greg to move on to the next. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to focus on healthcare, and that group was composed of Dr. Weber, Dr. Faber, and Lance Colley. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Weber.
Hi, everybody. So nice to be here, and so nice to have been asked to participate in this important group as we look to strengthen, renew, and establish new relationships in the community with partners to support our mission and to support and grow our mission and to support our partners' missions. And there's really nowhere that this is illustrated more strongly than in healthcare. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the wonderful partners I had who are both were very engaged in this work, Andrea Faber and Lance Colley, and we'll allow them to comment if they have any along the way. So let's jump right in, and if you can advance the slide, thank you. So in thinking about the landscape and where things come together for our partners and for us, there's really no big challenge that our partners have right now than the shortage of healthcare workers. This is, of course, a national problem, and this was a problem before the pandemic, and it's reached a critical mass. And this is in really every area of the healthcare workforce. Nursing gets a lot of press, of course. There is 195,000 about vacancies just for RNs across the country. Physician workforce shortages have been projected now for many years, but I don't think physicians have been hit quite as hard as nurses and bedside workers during this whole period of sort of chaos in the healthcare system. There's other workers that really don't get as much attention either. Things like mental health care workers, bedside workers, medical assistants, both in outpatient settings and inpatient settings, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. And so in thinking about our partners' needs, how can we train more of these critical workers to serve society? And of course, we have a new healthcare college, which we're very excited about, that can impact many of these areas. And so in thinking about this challenge and how can we meet the needs of our partners while also growing our own programs here to strengthen our university, we thought that a way that we could get started in the next, the short term that could lead to long-term results would be to set up a regional task force to really look at allied healthcare needs. And the task force would include not only partner hospitals and health systems, but also our other higher ed institutions to really look at what the needs are, how to prioritize them, what regional institutions have strengths in healthcare need A versus B and the different programs that already exist. So we could have a more coordinated look at how to quickly grow and meet these needs. Some of the activities of the work at the task force could include things like needs assessments, prioritizations of programs, looking at establishing different incentives for people to go into these areas, as well as pipeline programs. And some of the measurable goals and targets that we would want to establish would be how many new and expanded programs are there, how many graduates are we having in these target areas, and how many graduates are hired and retained. And of course, these are longer term goals, but these would be the outcome measures that you would want to establish. The next slide, please. The other area that we thought about is our rural areas surrounding our lake campus. And we already have a lot of groundwork laid here through both the medical school and the nursing programs at the lake campus. And we have really spectacular relationships with our healthcare systems there. We have a lot of students in our rural health track, and these are students that are from the region. We have students that grew up in these very small towns and are going to medical school and are doing activities to complete their medical education in these areas. And we have a new family medicine residency track that we're going to hear about the approval very soon. And we hope to be starting off next summer. And so that will be two strengths in which we can build on in this region. But we think that there's a real need to continue to engage our rural medicine community to expand this, to have more students in the region, perhaps to have expand our partnerships. And we have some wonderful folks working on this up in the region, led by Lori Martinson. And some of the measurable goals that we would have or targets would be, again, number of graduates remaining to practice in the region, a number of students who ultimately practice in rural areas. So this is a burgeoning strength that we have and something that we really think it's important for the university to continue to build upon. Do any of my partners have comments that they want to add? We just had these two slides, and then we can open it up for comments and questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Weber. And now we're going to introduce Tracy Kramer, Dr. Schmidt, and Bill Bigham to talk to us about relationship-focused P12 education. I'll turn it over to Dr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to be presenting and want to acknowledge the other members of our subgroup, Tracy Kramer and Bill Bigham. And I know Tracy was not able to be with us, but Bill is here. So I do invite Bill to chime in if I'm missing anything. I wanted to start out with some general comments about why P12 education in terms of partnerships and relationships is actually very important for us. So I think those of us who are in this group because we had suggested P12 education as a potential important industry partner, if you will, for this two-year bridge strategic plan. And I think that if we conceptualize this in terms of relationships and partnerships in the broadest sense that include business partners, but also government entities and nonprofit organizations, and of course P12 as public schools are very important for this. So they employ many people. All of these agencies and nonprofits and government entities are significant employers, and we have significant numbers of graduates who enter into these professions. So that is how we came, I think, to identify P12. But another reason is that it's extremely important to have a process of articulation between higher education and the school systems that feed into it. And we are discussing at our university how we can best be student-centered. What are the best practices for being student-centered? And we've had discussions around what it means to be a student-ready university. So we can't be a student-ready university if we don't know where our students are coming from, how they're being prepared, if we're not working with our partners who are preparing those students. And oftentimes we hear from faculty, there is a sense of frustration and there is the temptation to throw up one's hands and say, well, P12 isn't doing their job and we can't work with these students because they are not college ready. But the fact of the matter is we have a responsibility in meeting the students where they are that have been admitted to this university, but also working with our P12 partners in a process of communication and articulation so that we can better understand what their needs are and how we can serve those students who are hopefully coming up to us through the pipeline. So that's some of the broader context that I wanted to mention. And I think we could move to the next slide, please, Nova. Thank you. So another thing I'd like to emphasize is that while we're talking about P12 education, and we have a very significant role here at Wright State in terms of our teacher licensure programs and preparing teachers to go out into the workforce, there are also challenges, right? There are certain areas of shortage where we're not meeting needs. And there are also, I would like to add, existing initiatives that are happening that probably need greater coordination. So existing programs for teachers, graduate opportunities for teachers, programs for students, whether it be middle school or high school students, to come to the campus and become familiar with Wright State. These are all going on. There are a lot of great initiatives, but if we could have better coordination and sort of sustained follow-up with admissions, in terms of recruiting, I think we could improve the sort of the results there in terms of the students who actually end up coming to Wright State University. So this is tied to recruitment, but it's also tied to retention. Going back to the remarks I said that if we are going to better serve the students, we need to know where they're coming from, and we also need to be able to help P12 schools to better prepare their teachers and to provide additional opportunities for continuing education that will improve outcomes in the schools. So that's sort of the broad context there. Now, in this context, we talked about 3 different initiatives. And so we have here initiative 1, partnership outreach, focused events. So these would be specific focused events for P12 educators and students that will bring different stakeholders to campus and connect them to WSU in positive ways. As mentioned, they would provide recruitment opportunities, but also promote collaboration with the stakeholders. So the events will be created or enhanced based on the P12 partner need. I think that's a key thing to remember there, that we have to actually be working with the partners in creating these events, not just saying, doing that on our own and anticipating what we think their needs are without the communication with them. So in addition, feedback will be gathered to inform the planning of each event and future replication of those events. And what I would also say there, and this fits in with my remarks on coordination, that these focused events need to be more than just one-offs. There needs to be a coordination process and a follow-up process that creates also structures of continuing articulation and communication between the university and the P12 partners. So some specific ideas are educator conference. There's an existing WSUNER Learn Local conference. The idea was brought to transform this to a conference that focuses on the whole child. and involves more professions across campus that work with youth. I think, again, one of the ideas is that teacher partnerships with P12 are not just about teacher licensure programs. There are entities across the whole campus that can feed into this, that work with youth. And then there are also academic units that can work with our existing teachers in terms of continuing education and graduate opportunities. So it's a very holistic approach here. Summer institutes for educators, learner-focused professions, again, working on expanding an existing initiative, the CHEH Summer Partnership Institute. I mean, we could also mention a number of other smaller programs that exist. And if you'll, I apologize for bringing things from my own college, but for example, our summer music camps bring in many, many students over the course of the summer. And I know there are many efforts to also involve teachers in those programs and to work with admissions and to follow up to keep the communication going. But again, I think we need more coordination. We also have some events that take place during the year, for example, Foreign Language Immersion Day. We have the Model United Nations, things like this. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Third example, high school signature events to focus on career exploration. I think this is a really great idea. And again, this is another one that could involve anyone across the whole campus, not just teacher licensure programs. So if we want to familiarize students with what careers are in particular areas, bring them to campus for some sort of event and introduce them to that and get them thinking about what majors they're interested in and already before they enter college, what careers they might enter. And okay, so measurable goals and targets, registration and attendance numbers and events, participant surveys. Yes, we would want to, I think in that case, survey both the students and the teachers who would be accompanying their students. But again, I think we also long-term, realize this is a 2-year bridge plan, but long-term, we would also need to think about, what are the outcomes there? Are we increasing the number of students recruited perhaps from specific area schools into specific majors? And we would need to look at that sort of a target as well. So if we could go on to the next slide. Okay, so initiative 2, Education Partners Advisory Group. I think this is very important because I talked about the need for a structure of communication and articulation to bring together local P12 administrators, teachers, and related staff to help inform our programs. So how do we need, our programs meeting the needs of the school system, of future teachers? It's not always simply a case of we're offering what is required by the state, what's mandated. There are many other factors that need to be taken into consideration. This group then would come up with mutually beneficial endeavors to meet our mission and our goals, and then those of our education partners. Again, measurable goals, targets, attendance, evidence of program changes, stakeholder surveys. And if we could go on, we do have one more initiative, and I know I don't want to go over my time. The next slide, please.
Actually, I think in the last meeting, we wrapped one of those, the fourth one, into the very first one, which is why there's an A, B, and C.
Okay. All right. My apologies then.
No.
So I think then that I guess I pretty much covered it all, unless Bill has something to add that I have forgotten about.
The only thing I would just add is that as we looked at these programs, in some fashion, they were building off of existing things that happen in different areas of campus and in different ways, but we're just trying to expand the impact of those and focus on the intentionality and hopefully create ongoing multiple benefits for the university in a variety of ways.
Exactly. Thanks, Bill.
So we've received a summary presentation from each of the groups with respect to their draft areas of targeted initiative. And this is an opportunity for us during this live stream to take questions and feedback from the audience, But again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, this is being recorded. We know that there are members of the campus community which are not able at this time to participate, and they will have access to the video stream and to the presentation. And we'll again continue taking comments via email and other forms of communication while we finish the project itself. So Nova, if you can bring up the one summary slide. Thank you very much. Those are bulleted points of the information that we just went through. And with that, we will open up the floor. Daniel Palmer is monitoring the chat room. And so, Daniel, we'll ask you to manage any questions that come in. Daniel, I can't hear you if others can.
About now.
Yes.
Okay. In working to collaborate with external businesses in recent years, it seems one of the more difficult things we run into is the ability to develop raw ideas for collaboration into clear goals, deliverables, resources, and tangible outcomes, and then turn them into a legal contract that clearly defines that relationship. Will there be resources, best practices, templates, legal staff dedicated to developing clear contractual relationships with these partners?
Great question. Answer is yes.
Next question. For the P12 education group, have you investigated how these initiatives interplay with CCP structures, either CCP through WSU or the CCP Community College WSU pipeline?
That's also a really good question. And, you know, I think we just, and Bill, you can chime in too, we talked maybe a little bit, but not just tangentially about CCP, right? But I think that's a big question. And I guess really, no, we have not adequately investigated that, but I know that there are other initiatives going on elsewhere, because I've received emails about them, about looking at CCP, particularly with the units that are offering most of those courses, which of course is COLA and COSM. But Bill, have I forgotten anything?
No, but I think it's a great avenue to kind of look at to see how that integrates into any of these initiatives.
We have a comment related to education, Greg. They said, just please do not forget to include our community college partners as part of the partnerships.
Absolutely.
It's a great point.
Dr. Raymer, you had your hand up a minute ago. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to expound on Mark's question there. I think that I think that it's exacerbated the problem that you mentioned with smaller businesses that don't have the staff and the resources to do those kinds of things. So I just wanted to say your point is well taken, and I think having some template contracts, template agreements, and other kinds of things that are resources available for small businesses to define, here's the way we've interacted in the past, here's how we've worked together in the past with other groups. I think that would be a fantastic improvement in the way we get started in our partnerships. And so, I'm taking that to heart, and the group will be discussing that in the future. So thanks, Mark.
Greg, I have two related to the small business office. First being, do we still have a small business development center through the College of Business that local businesses can come for a consultation and solution?
I do not know the answer to that question unless someone on the video stream does. Otherwise, we will get an answer back to everyone on that.
Second question relating to that is what would constitute a small business?
So I think that's a fine question. I think we'll have to, we want to be as inclusive as we can in that. So, you know, I think there's somewhere there's a line, and we'll want to put that line on the higher end. We really want to engage all of our business partners, but I think the ones that have less resources and less ability to spare those resources to engage are what we're focusing on here. So I think we'll have to have that discussion. We'll set that boundary very generously, however, I would think.
And Mike, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, especially if we're focused on the defense industry and the base, they have a definition of what defines a small business from their vantage point.
Yeah, and so for example, you can look at the guidelines for who's eligible to participate in SBIR and STTR kinds of proposals. So there are some definitions that we can lean on there, yeah.
For the partnerships with businesses, are there any plans or ideas to expand this upon outside of the defense industry and tech industries?
The answer would be absolutely. And I think for the campus community, as you sit through, this is the first of a total of 6 listening sessions. So there will be 3 today, and there will be 3 next Friday. In total, they will cover the overall strategic plan direction. And I think what you'll see in there, which is what we have been seeing in our subgroup activity, is there is some overlap, which is a good thing. Several of the groups are identifying things like this. So I believe when we see the final product in terms of our 2-year plan, we may not be limited to just a College of Business initiative or a College of Engineering initiative. There may be more broad initiatives that span all the colleges.
Next question is, who would have the responsibility to ask for the seed grant funding?
So did you say who would have the responsibility to ask? Who would have the ability? So we're envisioning this at this point as something that would be, oh, I see what you mean, from the university level, who would ask for that funding. Well, so all of these initiatives are, you know, these are draft proposals. If this is adopted as part of our, you know, 2-year bridge strategic plan, then that funding would be, I would think, administered through RSP. It would be base budget funded as a small seed grant program. The size of that budget would be, you know, part of that discussion, I think. Greg, maybe you can expound on that a little more.
I agree with you completely.
We have a comment. Ohio is a strong tech prep state that continues to be funded, not just thinking about P12 in a traditional way. Please keep in mind that there are students in tech prep programs who are already invested and interested in education. Tech prep is offered at local school districts, but also at career tech centers.
Yeah, that's good. We actually talked a little bit about this and about the need also to find ways for students who are in STEM fields and doing sort of technical disciplines that are not thinking or not being sort of funneled toward education, to allow them to do that in potentially alternative ways, or looking at maybe coordinating with some of those programs and coursework, so that if students decided they wanted to go into teaching or they wanted to switch over to teaching, that it would be facilitated rather than become an incredibly complicated process.
Greg, that exhausts my list of questions.
Thank you, Daniel. The better question is, are you exhausted?
I did not read an executive session resolution, so I am alive and well.
Gina, you raised your hand. Did you have a question? No.
Just agreeing that I'm tired.
Yeah. All right. With that, we will be efficient with our time. Let me thank the committee members for the presentation and the information. Let me thank members of the campus community for taking the time to sit through this in the live stream. And again, encourage your fellow comrades to watch this, provide some feedback to the group. Again, you will receive 2 more live streams today. There'll be 3 more next Friday, and then the groups will be meeting and finalizing a draft document for presentation. So with that, on behalf of everyone, let me say thank you and have a great day today.